Alright, so this is my lightweight competition rifle I built. I built it using a Santan Tactical billet receiver set in Lancer Systems carbon fiber handrail and A2 length carbon fiber stock. Currently, it has a 14.5 inch Voodoo Innovations Evo Ultralight barrel, and I'm going to be swapping that out with the Proof Research barrel right here. The next thing I'm going to do is loosen the hardware for the gas block and move the gas block forward so I can get that gas tube out of there. After the gas tube has been removed, I can take an armorer's wrench and break the torque on the barrel nut. After it's been loosened, unthread the barrel nut the rest of the way and move it forward. Now I can't remove the gas block or the barrel nut because this Surefire SFMB 556 muzzle brake is permanently attached to this 14.5 inch barrel to keep it legal so I wouldn't have to do paperwork for an SBR. I'm able to get my Voodoo barrel out by wiggling it in small circles, pulling on it, and taking it out of the upper receiver. Now most barrel nuts are going to secure your barrel to your upper receiver, mating these two portions together flush, with the index pin going into the indexing slot on the upper receiver's threads. So with my Lancer Systems free float handrail, instead of having a barrel nut with internal threads to thread onto this upper receiver, that adapter / extension is threaded onto the upper receiver's threads, and then I'm going to use a barrel nut external threads to thread onto this extension. And here's the inside. You can see the upper receiver area right here where the barrel is going to slide into. You're going to see the index slot for the index pin on the barrel. You're going to see the hole for the gas tube. And then these threads here, those are the internal threads that the external threads on my barrel nut are going to thread into. Now, the high dollar, high end items for AR-15s and rifles in general, those parts usually have a higher tolerance or a tighter tolerance. Parts that are cheaper are going to have a wider tolerance range. Now, when it comes to tolerance for accuracy on an AR-15 barrel, you're going to want the outer diameter of this barrel extension to be as close to the inner diameter of your upper receiver as possible without being an interference fit. Here's just an upper receiver I have, and I put in my Voodoo Innovations barrel, and I can put it in there pretty easily with one hand and get it back out. And that tells you the tolerance in both are pretty loose. Just switching the barrels from the Voodoo barrel to the Proof Research barrel, I can hardly get the Proof Research barrel in there. That tells you that Proof Research barrel's tolerances are a lot better than the Voodoo Innovations barrel. I can hardly get the barrel started in this receiver, and then once I do, it's really hard for me to get them back apart with one hand. Okay, if your barrel slides into your upper receiver really easily and comes right back out easily, I'll suggest that you bed it with something, whether that be a red or a blue Loctite. Now, Loctite doesn't do good with heat, and when it heats up and cools down over time, repeatedly, it's going to break down, but it'll still do its job. Now, instead of using a red or a blue Loctite, I chose to use this Indian head gasket compound, and it's made for engines, so it's used to heating up and cooling down, and it's not going to break down as easily as a Loctite will, so it's going to be a little better at doing its job. You put whatever bedding compound you want to use around your barrel extension, and as you press it into your upper receiver, it should coat the whole length. There's going to be a little bit that spills out. You can take whatever you need to wipe it away. Now, the tolerances on my Santan Tactical upper receiver and this Proof Research barrel, it's pretty tight. What I did is I got it barely started and made sure that the indexing pin on the barrel extension was at the 12 o'clock position lined up with the slot in the upper receiver. And because I have that receiver extension, I had to look underneath there and make sure with a light that the pin was indexed and lined up. It was such a tight tolerance that I had to take a soft tip mallet just to get it started. Now I tapped the barrel into the receiver just enough so that I could slide the barrel nut on there and get the threads started. Once the threads are started, I'm going to use the barrel nut to seat the barrel to the receiver. Now I take the armorer's wrench and I tighten the barrel nut down a good bit. Then I stop and I take the receiver out of the vise and I check to see how far I have to go. When I look in the upper receiver from the back, you'll see the barrel in the receiver, and you'll see where the feed ramps on the barrel line up with the feed ramps on the upper receiver. And you can also see the distance you have to go to make the barrel extension flush or practically flush with the inside of the receiver there. So I see I have a ways to go, so I put it back in the receiver block in the vise, and I tighten it down a few more turns. Then I take it back out, and I see how far I have to go. Put it back into the vise and turn a little bit more. I take it out, I see that it's practically flush with the upper receiver, plus I felt the barrel nut completely seat the barrel to the receiver. After that, I loosen the barrel nut and take the barrel nut off. I have an SLR titanium adjustable gas block that I'm going to use for this barrel, and I have this little hobby vise that I like to use. Put the roll pin on the gas block, and I use that Indian head gasket compound as something sticky to keep it upright. I don't have another hand to hold it, so it's holding itself right now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these channel locks, and I'm just going to press the roll pin into the hole just enough to get it started so I don't have to worry about it falling over as I put the gas tube in. Now here's your gas tube. Now a gas tube is going to have one end that's closed off that has 3 holes. 2 of those holes you're going to be able to see through end to end, and that's the end that the roll pin goes through. And that bigger hole down there, that's the hole the gas from the barrel goes into to cycle your bolt. So I put the gas tube in the gas block, and I make sure that it's all the way through, that it's lined up with the roll pin. Then I take the channel locks and I squeeze, pushing the roll pin all the way through. Then I use the corner of the channel lock to get that roll pin flush with the gas block. Then I take it out and make sure that everything looks good. It does, so on to the next step. So the next step is tightening and torquing down the barrel nut. Now you have a torque wrench and you torque it to whatever the manufacturer specifies the torque to be. And that's usually somewhere between 50 and 80 foot-pounds. Now with torque wrenches, you just can't put an adapter on a torque wrench and set the torque and think that it's going to be good, like it is right here. With this torque adapter extending the length of the torque wrench, it's going to modify the actual torque value when you tighten it down. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to rotate the torque wrench so that the adapter, whatever adapter you're using, is at a 90-degree angle to the torque wrench. Now I've put the barrel nut back onto the barrel, and I take a thread anti-seize compound and I put a little bit on the threads and spread it around. Now putting anti-seize on the threads are good because say if in the future you want to switch out barrels again, this is going to make sure that it doesn't get seized up there. Now if you bed the barrel using Loctite or this head gasket compound, if any of that got onto the threads, that would make it a lot harder to take this barrel nut off in the future if you have to. But apply a little bit of this anti-seize compound onto the barrel nut and then thread it back in, get it started. Now I'm going to set my torque wrench to the lowest torque that's required, which is 50 foot-pounds, and I'll tell you the reason why I'm going to do that. It's at 50 foot-pounds, I put it on, and I torque it. So after I torque it to that lowest setting, 50 foot-pounds, I'll put the gas block with the gas tube on the barrel and see if the notches in the barrel nut line up so that the gas tube will slide through. And as you can see, it doesn't line up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it back out and I'm going to set my torque wrench to the highest torque, which is 80 foot-pounds. All I'm going to do is tighten it until one of two things happens. I'm going to tighten it until one of the notches lines up so the gas tube slides through, or until I reach the 80 foot-pound torque. So I tighten it and it barely moves and it hits that 80 foot-pound torque limit. And then I check my gas tube to see if it lines up, and it still doesn't line up. So I looked at the barrel nut and saw that there's no way that I was going to be able to get enough out of that torque wrench. Even if I backed it off and tried to rethread it, it just wasn't going to happen. So what I'm going to do is break the torque and just take the barrel nut completely off. I'm going to use some barrel nut shims so that I can get this gas tube lined up. I'm not going to use the thin one, I'm not going to use the really thick one, I'm just going to use the one in the middle here. Slide the shim onto the barrel and slide the barrel nut onto the barrel right behind the shim. Tighten the barrel nut on, finger tight, then take the wrench, tighten it down just a little bit more. And then I'm going to take my torque wrench and I'm going to set it back to the lowest torque setting, which was 50 foot-pounds. Tighten it, you're going to hear the torque click. The gas tube isn't lined up, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the torque to its highest torque limit, which is 80 foot-pounds again. As I'm tightening it, I hear the torque wrench snap again. That means that it's reached its torque. And I look at it, and now the notch in the barrel nut is aligned with the hole in the extension and the upper receiver, so I'm good to go. Now when I install the gas block and gas tube, install all the way and then turn it all the way to the right and left. See how much play you got there. You want to get it as centered as possible so that it's not touching the barrel nut, the extension there, or the receiver right here. Now a good way to check to make sure that your gas tube isn't touching your barrel nut is to take a piece of paper and pass it between the gas tube and the barrel nut. If it slides with no interference, that means you're good. It looks like I'm good. So instead of using a clamp-on type gas block like I had on my Voodoo barrel, this SLR titanium adjustable gas block is the set screw version. And this Proof Research barrel has dimples for those set screws to fit in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tighten down one of the set screws. And after I tighten down one of the set screws, I'm going to take the other one completely out. I'm going to put a drop of blue Loctite on the threads of that set screw. Then, without moving the gas block, because if you move the gas block, you move the gas tube, and install it into the gas block. Once it's all the way down and tightened, I can take the other set screw out, put a drop of blue Loctite on the threads, and reinstall that set screw. Then I'm going to torque them both to the universal German torque spec, which is Guten tight. Then take a rag and wipe away the excess blue Loctite, because it's got to look pretty, right? Then the last thing to do is install that carbon fiber handguard back onto the extension and install the hardware securing the handguard, and I'm done. My next AR15 video will be a breakdown of this competition rifle on the parts that I used, why I used them, and what I think of them. I hope you liked this video. If you did, give it a like. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And if you like this video and want more videos like it, go to the Facebook page and let me know. See you next time.